Hello, today I'm going to talk about my top 10 Gnostic films second edition. There is a first edition of this video. If you haven't seen that, you might want to watch that first because I'm going to reference some of the ideas in that video. I also have many other videos on Gnosticism. If you want to get a better idea of it, you might want to check out that playlist. There will be major spoilers for these films. To talk about them through a Gnostic lens, I have to talk about most of the spoilers, so be warned on that. Gnosticism is a mystical and esoteric belief system that emphasizes hidden knowledge, gnosis, as the path to spiritual enlightenment and liberation. Central to its cosmology is the monad, the ineffable transcendent source of all existence, which emanates to the pleroma, the fullness of divine realms or aeons. One of these aeons, Sophia, the embodiment of wisdom, plays a pivotal role in the Gnostic myth. In her yearning to know the monad, she inadvertently generates the demiurge, a flawed, ignorant creator deity who shapes the material world, known as the kenoma, the void or deficiency, trapping sparks of divine light within it. Gnosticism teaches that salvation lies in recognizing and transcending this material illusion to reunite with the pleroma through divine knowledge. So my first video focused more on the demiurge and the created false realities and sort of the archons within that. Films like The Matrix and Dark City, where there's kind of an artificial world. I do have some of that on this list, but this one is a little bit more about escaping and anamnesis, which is the recovery of our eternal memories into the present. So a lot of the films on this list either have to do with people trying to escape the false reality or recover their memories. I have a few honorable mentions that I want to put out there. Some of these, I rewatched a few of them and I like some of them, but I think either the films that I picked I thought were better to talk about, or I just didn't think the other films were good enough compared to the ones that I chose. So you can see the usernames of the people that recommended these. I did rewatch City of Lost Children, and I used to love that movie when I was younger, but I could not stand it this time. I don't know why. I also rewatched The Lawnmower Man. I hadn't seen that in years. I liked it, but like I said, I think some of these other ones are a little bit better. This is a top 10 list, but there are actually 12 films on here. I have 2 ties. So anyway, let's get started. At number 10, we have Pleasantville from 1998. Directed by Gary Ross, starring Tobey Maguire, Reese Witherspoon, Joan Allen, William H. Macy, and Jeff Daniels. Pleasantville explores a dualistic awakening as 2 modern teenagers are transported into a 1950s black and white sitcom world where they ignite transformation by introducing individuality, self-awareness, and desire. The shift from monochrome conformity to vibrant color symbolizes the liberation of divine sparks trapped within the illusion of perfection, a controlled false paradise. The first thing I want to say about this is I think the choice for the demiurge character, the casting is brilliant. Don Knotts is kind of the perfect person to represent the demiurge. He's almost like a cartoon, but you can definitely see him having some kind of malice in his delivery, even though it's over the top and kind of funny. So they say in Anamnesis that we lose our memories in the shock of birth. In this film, their shock of birth, they enter this 1950s movie. And they do actually retain their memories, which I think in Gnosticism would be more of a pneumatic stance, because they've kind of transcended temporal existence by being able to bring their memories from their past life into their present one. And they are stuck in Nerdville, is the way that they put it, which is basically stuck in ignorance. So as the film goes on, there's this kind of battle, this us versus them, between the awakened and the NPCs. The black and white kind of represents the Hylic. These people are kind of ignorant and they're not spiritually awakened. But as they are awakened, they become color. The truth is kind of infectious. It almost becomes an epidemic, spreading from one person to the next, which I think is actually how this stuff works. Reese Witherspoon is kind of the Eve character. She's bringing the forbidden fruit into this Pleasantville. She kind of transforms everything inadvertently, including herself. There's one scene in particular that I really liked where it was still, everything was predominantly black and white, but then they saw a red rose, and I thought that was a nice touch, referring back to Rosicrucianism. The rose is often a symbol for the universe. In the Dark Tower series, Stephen King uses it as a symbol. There's one actually really funny line that cracked me up. It just killed me. When I just rewatched it, this line, "Thank goodness we're in a bowling alley." Just really, I don't know. There are a lot of funny lines in the film in general, but that one just really got me. I don't know why. And I think the main takeaway from this film is awakening can't be contained or taken away from you. At number 9, we have The Island from 2005, directed by Michael Bay, starring Ewan McGregor and Scarlett Johansson. The isolated facility represents the demiurgic control of a false reality. The protagonist's realization of their true nature as clones mirrors the awakening to the illusion of material existence and the pursuit of freedom from oppressive control. So the facility in this is the isolated environment. It's the Konoma, it's the false reality, and it's generated by Dr. Merrick and his corporation. He is the demiurge. Rewatching this, I haven't seen it since it came out. I think I saw it at the theater. So it's been a long time since I've seen it. But rewatching it, I was very taken by the lottery. And there's a few reasons for this. The first is that the lottery is a false salvation. It's presented as this reward. It's almost like a heaven kind of thing. If you do good in this life, you'll get to go to heaven. But that's also kind of a false religion because they're worshiping it, and there are these video screens that are constantly bombarding them with images about the lottery. They all come together almost like a mass to watch the actual process of choosing the lottery. The two main characters, Lincoln 6 Echo, played by Ewan McGregor, Jordan 2 Delta, played by Scarlett Johansson. Lincoln is the Gnostic seeker, and Jordan is the Sophia figure. There are two things that lead him to question this. His unrealized love for her. Over the course of the film, he starts to understand what love is, but I think at the beginning he's so childlike that he doesn't know, but he can kind of feel it deep down. There's that, and then his own curiosity. So those two things kind of fuel his escape. This idea of organ harvesting is a very archonic idea of vampirism of a living person. But the odd thing is that it's for another living person. That's, I think, the difference. There are a lot of ideas here about ethics and individuality, subjugation and commodity. When they escape the facility, spoilers, and they enter the desert is kind of the pleroma because it's the unknown space, the vastness that they don't know. They're just thrown out into this place that is completely unknown to them. Yeah, I thought it's a good film, but I definitely think it references other films that came before it. I'm going to talk about a few of them in a moment. Number 8, we have Flashback, also known as The Education of Frederick Fitzel, from 2020, directed by Christopher McBride, starring Dylan O'Brien, Micah Monroe, Hannah Gross, and Keir Gilchrist. Flashback delves into a man's journey to uncover hidden truths about his past, represented by fragmented memories and alternate realities. The drug mercury serves as a metaphorical key to gnosis. Okay, so this is the first time I've actually seen this film, and it affected me in a visceral way. I've had my own psychedelic experiences in the past. Some of them were amazing, some of them were not so good. And there are parts of this that actually brought up a lot of negative emotions tied to some of the bad trips that I've had. So in some ways, this was a difficult watch for me, especially the second half. It also makes you consider your choices and regrets you may have had in the past and different paths you could have taken. So in that way, I think it was pretty profound for me. Even though it was an unsettling watch, it definitely hit something inside of me. The film is about anamnesis, the recovering of eternal memories. I think the first half of the film deals with this really well because you don't know really what's happening, and I like the mystery in that. There are these concurrent realities that are going on. The memories are kind of merging together. You're not really sure what's happening. It's clear he has these regrets about something that happened in the past that he's chosen to kind of get rid of or banish from his mind. A lot of these films that I put on here, there's a story that's happening in linear time, but I think you can apply that to kind of an eternal time. It's his life, but if you think of it as his eternal life and at these different sections that he's kind of recalling or going back to are different lives, and it's very interesting. There's one moment that stood out to me, and that is when he's under the influence of Mercury. He has this kind of bad trip, and there's this definite demiurgic control going on. It's actually quite disturbing to watch. It felt kind of wrong, and it definitely harkened back to some bad trips that I had. And at one moment I had to actually turn it off and kind of take a little break and then come back to it because it was a little bit overwhelming. And that's a sign of an effective film, but it still kind of bothered me a little bit. Micah Monroe is the kind of Sophia, but a more Ecomoth Sophia. And you could even say she's sort of archonic and a little bit Lilith-like. At the beginning of the film, you think that she's going to be a good influence, but she actually kind of turns out to be a bad influence and kind of maybe takes him down a bad road, but it is a road to awakening, so I don't know. I definitely think the first half of this film is better than the second. It didn't really stick the landing for me. I kind of get what it was going for, but the mystery I think was the more riveting part. At number 7 we have a tie. The first is Logan's Run from 1976, directed by Michael Anderson, starring Michael York, Jenny Agutter, and Richard Jordan. Logan's Run explores a dystopian society where citizens live in a hedonistic, controlled environment but are euthanized at age 30, symbolizing ignorance enforced by the demiurge-like governing system. Logan's escape and discovery of the truth about the outside world mirror the Gnostic journey to enlightenment. And the second film is THX 1138 from 1971, directed by George Lucas, starring Robert Duvall, Donald Pleasance, and Maggie McComey. THX 1138 portrays a sterile, totalitarian society where human emotions and individuality are suppressed, symbolizing the Gnostic concept of entrapment in a false material world created by a controlling demiurge. These are both dystopian escape films. I definitely think they're done better than The Island, and they are certainly an influence on that film. I'm going to talk about Logan's Run a little bit first. There is a very interesting soundtrack for this. There's also a soundtrack for an imagined sequel called Logan's Sanctuary, which I love. It's by Roger Joseph Manning Jr. and Brian Ritzel, and they were both in the band TV Eyes, and Manning was also in Jellyfish. It's really interesting soundtrack. If you haven't heard it, you should check it out. The thing that really got me in the rewatch of this is the carousel. You know, it's a circle. When you think of the machine, a carousel, a merry-go-round, it's like you keep having to do it over and over again. And even when you look at the images of the horses, like if you see the horses, they always look like they're in terror or kind of pain. They don't look happy. They look like something is wrong, which is really interesting. In this, the carousel is a device similar to renewal from The Island. It's this idea that you're gonna go to this great place and something good is gonna happen. It's a false religion, kind of. Jessica is the Sophia character. She's actually a little bit like Isis as well. She even has an Ankh necklace. There was one part that actually made me laugh quite a bit. There's this thing they called the circuit, which was basically Tinder in the 70s. Well, in the future, but recorded in the 70s. It represents the demiurgic illusion of being trapped in your vices. The madman at the end of the film is the wise old man archetype, and he has all these cats, and of course they live in a domed city which is their false paradise. It's a kind of sexual paradise, paradise of vice. In this, the underground represents the abyss, the Kenoma. It's the false reality, the sterile, artificial environment, a prison. And through his escape, THX climbs to the surface, which is a symbol of ascension. OMM0910 is the computerized demiurge controlling the whole prison. And there's a surveillance system, and that's actually in both films. It's the eye of the demiurge. You could even say like the eye of Sauron. It's like watching everything. You can't do anything without the surveillance seeing it. THX is the individual soul seeking Gnostic enlightenment. And LUH is the catalyst. She is the Sophia character. There is one moment that really sticks out, and that's at the final shot of the film. He looks at the sky, and it's almost a realization that there are even higher realms. So not only does he escape the Kenoma, he comes under the gnosis that escaping that is not the end, there is more. And at number 6, we have another tie. But these are actually prison films. The first is The Shawshank Redemption from 1994, and the second is Escape from Alcatraz from 1979. Shawshank is directed by Frank Darabont, and Alcatraz is directed by Don Siegel. Shawshank stars Tim Robbins and Morgan Freeman, and Alcatraz stars Clint Eastwood and Patrick McGoohan. Both films depict imprisonment as a metaphor for the soul's entrapment in the material world. The protagonist's ingenious escapes symbolize the liberation of the divine spark within through perseverance and knowledge. I'm going to talk about these as one thing. It's just a little bit easier because they are very similar. So while THX and Logan's Run are sci-fi, these are grounded, but they do have a lot of similarities. In both films, the prisons are the Kenoma. They both have corrupt wardens. In Shawshank, it's Warden Norton, and in Alcatraz, it's Warden Bartlett. In both films, there is a prisoner resigned to their fate. In Shawshank, it is Red. In Alcatraz, it is Litmus. You also have Gnostic seekers in both films. In Shawshank, it is Andy, and in Alcatraz, it is Frank. I think the main symbol to take away from both of these is the idea of determination and commitment, and that the Gnostic search for transcendence is not a one-moment thing. It's a constant struggle and work to accomplish it. And in this, they both build kind of tunnels, which takes years of effort and commitment to complete. And not just that, but secrecy. Both characters must pass through water to gain their freedom. Andy goes through the sewer pipe, and Frank passes through San Francisco Bay. I'll also note that they're both really good movies. You know, some people think Shawshank Redemption is the greatest movie ever made. I'm not sure if that's the case, but it is an excellent film. And Alcatraz is really good too, especially if you're a Clint Eastwood fan. Or if you like Patrick McGoohan, because he was in the TV show The Prisoner, which is pretty much a Gnostic TV show. I might do a video on it someday, we'll see. At number 5, we have Seconds from 1966, directed by John Frankenheimer, starring Rock Hudson. Seconds follows the story of a middle-aged man, Arthur Hamilton, who undergoes a radical transformation through a secretive procedure that gives him a new identity and life. The film's exploration of identity, the quest for personal reinvention, and the consequences of escaping the self can be interpreted through a Gnostic lens, as Hamilton's journey reflects the struggle between the illusion of a perfect material life and the deeper unresolved truths about existence. David Lynch just passed, rest in peace, and I actually watched this film maybe a week before he passed, and all I could think of was David Lynch when I was watching this. In fact, I would say maybe Lynch got a lot from this film, if he had ever seen it, I'm not sure. But it's definitely about identity. There's something very Mulholland Drive and Lost Highway about it to me. I don't want to say too much about it because I don't want to give away all the surprises. It is considered a cult film, and I can see why. If you know Frankenheimer's work, he's best known for The Manchurian Candidate, which is also a movie about identity. In this one, it's a rebirth process where a character enters a false reality. A lot of these films, they escape one. In this one, he actually goes into one, and it's kind of a secret society. I think the main lesson of the film is the emptiness of materialism. There's also a lot of regrets in here, similar to the film Flashback, where a person makes these choices and then they have to kind of grapple with the results of their choices. There's also this idea of a repeating cycle, like, well, if I don't do it this time, I can accomplish it the next time, and on and on. This was a bit of a failure when it came out, but it's definitely an interesting film. The cinematography is amazing. It's shot in black and white. There's a lot of interesting abstraction and camera shots, and if you think about David Lynch intros to his films, there's always like close-ups of fire or some kind of abstraction. That's kind of how this film starts out. There's this awesome opening sequence with these close-ups of eyes and mouths and ears, and it definitely represents the senses, but through the lens they're being kind of distorted and pulled. So it's showing that you can't really trust your senses in this false reality. It definitely establishes dread when you're watching it. And yeah, I think the film is quite good. Rock Hudson is excellent in it. And I think you should check it out if you haven't seen it. At number 4, we have Paycheck from 2003, directed by John Woo, starring Ben Affleck, Uma Thurman, and Aaron Eckhart. Paycheck follows Michael Jennings, a highly skilled engineer who undergoes memory erasure after each project for a corporation, only to find that his latest job has resulted in him losing not just his memory, but his life savings. The film explores the theme of memory and identity, symbolizing the Gnostic struggle to uncover lost knowledge and break free from external control. If you watched my other top 10 Gnostic films list, I'm a big Philip K. Dick fan. I have Blade Runner on that list. I could put almost any Philip K. Dick film on here, really. But I think Paycheck is an interesting one in terms of anamnesis and identity, so I chose that one. So this one is about erasing memories. I want to take a second to talk about a figure in Gnosticism, Aletheia, I think is how you say the name, and it's kind of an analog of Mnemosyne in Greek myth, which Mnemosyne is where we get a lot of the words for mnemonic, memory or remember. Those all come from her. Aletheia, if you take the name, means not, and leth means forgetfulness or concealment. So it means basically don't forget or, unconceal. It also kind of means bring something into the light. Heidegger said unconcealment where beings are revealed in their essence. And I think that is illustrated wonderfully here and in the short story. So each deal that Jennings makes with Rethric, who is the Gnostic demiurge in this, played by Aaron Eckhart, is kind of a new life, if you look at it that way. And you can see these deals that he makes as a demiurge soul trap. He's being bribed into staying into materiality by gaining wealth, status, etc. Uma Thurman plays the Sophia character. One thing I liked about her in this is, especially at the beginning, when you first meet her, she's very standoffish, and he keeps trying to kind of get to know her, and she's kind of like, giving him shade, let's say. But I think that is a lot how wisdom is. It takes a long time to understand something, and you have to keep trying and trying in order to understand something. And there's even one point where she says, "Don't give up," with this kind of knowing look on her face, like you're almost there. If you keep going, you will get the solution. There's this thing called A life, which is the living monitor, which is definitely part of the demiurgic control. So he goes through these different lives. I mean, in the film it's one life, but I kind of see it a different way. I see it as many lives. And there's a point where he realizes he has to leave clues to himself. And I think we actually do that as eternal beings. I think we do leave clues to ourselves. When you have a moment of deja vu, or you see some symbol through synchronicity, those are kind of clues. And somehow, your eternal self has provided those. And in this, there are a bunch of items. They trigger memories, or they are used as like keys to locks almost. Sometimes these memories come back violently. And I definitely think that's the case in real life. If you have any moments of anamnesis, they're not always clean and tidy. You might have it through a dream, or you might have it in waking life, and it isn't good. It usually can be quite destructive, especially to the status quo of your life. And in this case, his whole life gets turned upside down. One thing I noticed that was really fun is there are a few scenes where Aaron Eckhart is near a computer screen, and next to it, it says error 41 as like the error message. And it's great because he's the demiurge, which is considered an error. And then if you look into the numerology of 41, 4 is the master builder number. It represents stability and structure. And number 1 is the call to action. So I thought that was brilliant. Little Easter egg there. Now, my only problem with the film, it's a good action film. Like many of Philip K. Dick's stories, it changes the tone. Philip K. Dick's stories are more about introspection and they're more internal, whereas in the Hollywood films, they always pump up the action and make them kind of spectacle-like, but I don't really think that's how they are intended. And there is a difference between the film ending and the story ending. The story ending is much more ambiguous, so I think I prefer that one better. At number 3, we have Inception from 2010, directed by Christopher Nolan, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Joseph Gordon-Levitt, Ellen Page, now Elliot Page, Tom Hardy, Ken Watanabe, Cillian Murphy, Marion Cotillard, and Michael Caine. Inception follows Dom Cobb, a skilled thief who enters people's dreams to steal secrets from their subconscious. Cobb is offered a chance to have his criminal record erased if he can perform an inception, implanting an idea into someone's mind without them knowing. The film explores themes of reality, illusion, and the nature of consciousness, paralleling Gnostic ideas of waking up from a false constructed world, the dream, to discover the truth hidden beneath layers of deception and control. I will say that I think this is maybe Nolan's best film. That and The Prestige, I think, are both great films. This one kind of hits all the right buttons. And as far as a Gnostic film, I definitely think it's quite deep. In fact, I could probably do a whole video on it. I'm not going to do that, but there's a lot here. There are totems. The spinning top is like the carousel, around and around and around again. There's this really interesting idea of the dream layers, and you could see them as the Konoma, the abyss, the pleroma. There's so many different layers, especially near the end of the film. They keep going down deeper and deeper. Once you do that, you start to think which one is reality. The ambiguity in this is great, because at the end of the film, you're not really sure. There's a few clues that kind of say, well, maybe he's still down there. This reminds me of the Edgar Allan Poe quote, "All that we see or seem is but a dream within a dream." There are a lot of other symbols here. Ariadne creates the labyrinths. That's a pretty heavy-handed symbol, but it's there. The Mal character, malus, means bad or evil in Latin. When you think of words like malady or malabsorption, it means that something is not going well or is bad. She is kind of the Sophia character, but she's more of a haunting illusion about regrets and kind of possession and mistakes that we made in the past. And she is possessed by an idea she can't wake up from, which shows the Gnostic illusion that, a lot of the Hylics can't wake up from the illusion. When they go into the dream world, the dreamer's subconscious has projections, and these are like the archons, and they have kind of demiurgic omnipotence where they can, know what's going on and follow you and chase you. And they even kind of say in the film that in life, like the projections persecute the dreamer. That can happen. And in Cobb's case, that is kind of the case, because not only are the projections inside the dream persecuting him, but the demiurgic control structures of the world are also persecuting him. He can't return to America. And through it, he needs to get some kind of redemption or catharsis. One part of the film I especially like is when they say Do they come here every day to dream? And he says, no, they come here to be woken up. And number 2, we have The Wizard of Oz from 1939, directed by Victor Fleming, among others, starring Judy Garland, Frank Morgan, and Ray Bolger. Dorothy's journey through Oz represents the soul's quest for enlightenment. The Wicked Witch, a false godlike figure, embodies the demiurge, while the realization that Dorothy has the power to return home all along symbolizes the discovery of the divine within. I think a lot of people think that in this film that the wizard is the demiurge, but I'm going to explain my point of view. So to begin with, Dorothy is this Gnostic seeker. That is obvious. What isn't quite as obvious is her 3 companions, the Scarecrow, the Tin Man, and the Lion, are not really people, in my opinion. They're qualities that she needs to transcend reality. For the Scarecrow, she needs brains, which is knowledge. The Tin Man is heart, which is will and faith. The Lion is courage, which is bravery. You need all those things to be able to wake up from the false reality. When she meets these 3 companions, they're all in prisons of their own. The Scarecrow is stuck to a post. The Tin Man is rusted stiff, and the Lion is a coward. He's in a prison of his own cowardice. I'll also mention that Toto means all in many languages. Tutto in Italian, Toto in Spanish, and totus in Latin. All of those mean everything or all. And it's interesting because she's constantly trying to get Toto back so she can have everything. So she can have the pleroma, the all. The Good Witch is the Sophia character. She is the North Star, so she's the Witch of the North. The Wicked Witch is, in my opinion, the Demiurge. She is the Witch of the West. And in symbolism, the West is the symbol for death. The witches, flying monkeys, and soldiers are her archons. I see Oz, the wizard, as the true God. He is the hidden God behind the screen. He's also Professor Marvel. Kansas represents the duality, black and white as a duality. The land of Oz, I feel like, is the psychic world, the awakened world. It's similar to Pleasantville in that regard. But the Emerald City is the pleroma. That's like the monad, the ultimate goal. If you look at the symbolism of emeralds, they represent wisdom, renewal, and divine insight. The ruby slippers represents she has to do this by her own power. Rubies symbolize the soul's connection to the material. Jumping back to the witch for a moment, her real name, or her other name, is Elmira Gulch. If you look into the symbolism and the etymology behind that, she is basically the princess or lady of the abyss, or of the whole. I don't mean whole like entirety, I mean whole like, and there's even a scene where she tries to put them asleep. She says, poppies will put them asleep. And that's the archonic addictions, the veil of ignorance coming down on them where they're not awakened anymore. However, Glinda, the Sophia character, wakes them up through a snowstorm that she brings. And at the end, water could be seen as like holy water for a vampire, or could also be seen as baptism. But it's the cleansing away of the ignorance to reveal gnosis. I have a odd personal connection to this film because as a kid I used to watch it all the time, at least once a year, if not a few times a year. It was odd watching it again because I never looked at it under a Gnostic lens, and it just really made me see it differently. And at number 1, we have The Last Temptation of Christ from 1988, directed by Martin Scorsese, starring Willem Dafoe, Harvey Keitel, and Barbara Hershey. The film explores Christ's humanity and the concept of temptation. The rejection of the last temptation and acceptance of his divine mission aligns with Gnostic themes of transcending the material for spiritual truth. So this is based off of a novel by Nikos Kazantzakis. I think I'm saying that right. Like The Fountain on my first top 10 list, this is a heavy film emotionally, at least it was for me. This last time I saw it, I used to actually have this on Laserdisc. That shows how old I am, but I used to watch it quite a lot back in the day. I think Willem Dafoe is quite amazing in this movie. I almost would go so far as to say this is my favorite Scorsese film. I know people might say Taxi Driver or Goodfellas or something, but I actually feel that this might be one of his more personal films. His gangster films to me are kind of stories that, as a filmmaker, I think he knows he can get done and people will want to watch them and accept them and they'll be successful. But I feel like this was more of a risk. You know, with the amount of outrage that this film sparked, he had to have believed in it from a personal point of view to get it made, I feel like. It opens with this red-black wall of thorns. It's a very striking, graphic image. I love it. You kind of have to pass through it, which I think right there is a huge Gnostic symbol. And it starts with Christ on the ground, like he's been dropped, which is also interesting. You hear this screeching eagle, and you hear this eagle many times through the film. It's supposed to represent divine inspiration. But in this case, it's like a pain. It's like, He even says the pain starts. That's one of the lines he says. Then it becomes this thing. These voices that he hears, are they God or are they Satan? Or you could say the demiurge. And I think that's the main point of this film, is to show the doubt. The seeker becomes more confident in faith after his tests and his visions. But even still, there is doubt. No matter how much he does, whether he raises Lazarus or he puts the ear back on the guy, all these things, he still has doubt, which is ridiculous because you'd think if he could do those things that he would have no doubt. And I would say I think this is the best film to portray this struggle, this moral complexity that we have, where you want to live in a material world, you want material comforts, but you also want to transcend and you want to live a life of high ethics and faith. I feel like the suffering and the redemption in this is quite visceral. This film feels real to me, like the way that Scorsese shot it, the brutality of a lot of it, the dust, it's very gritty. Like it just feels kind of real. The woodworker, the cross maker, builds his own prison of suffering. He builds the cross. And it comes down to the forsaken ego. It's a test to face his inner demons. There's a great shot when he's being crucified and they're raising him up, and it's a first person point of view. It's like you're seeing the sky and you're coming up. That is an amazing shot. It puts you right there. It makes you feel for Jesus. And once he's up there, he has to overcome even more illusions. Earlier in the film, he has this confrontation with an asp, a snake. He also has a conversation with a dead mystic that he finds out had been dead before he had the conversation, another illusion. And then the final illusion is he's presented with an angel. For a lot of this time of the film, you think the angel is actually an angel, but it turns out to be Satan, or the demiurge. So his last temptation is to live a normal life of the flesh. So he's presented with this false reality, but he resists the demiurge. And in the final moments, he says, "It is accomplished." And that really hit me hard, because when I thought of that, I thought of the idea of, on one hand, atonement, but also the Philosopher's Stone, the completion of the great work, the magnum opus. It is done. So there are a few more things I want to point out that I thought were pretty great about this. The first thing is Peter Gabriel's soundtrack, The Passion. It is such a great soundtrack. If you haven't heard it, you should definitely listen to it. In the film, there are some key moments where if it wasn't there, I don't know if it would be as powerful, and it really elevates some of the scenes. The Judas character is very different here. In the Bible, he is a traitor. He represents greed. In the Gospel of Judas, one of the Nag Hammadi texts, Jesus instructs him to tell the Romans. So in the Nag Hammadi, he is Jesus' highest confidant. He even learns some of the Master's teachings that the other apostles don't have. I definitely think they drew from the Gnostic Judas, not the biblical Judas. David Bowie is excellent here in his cameo as Pontius Pilate. He represents Rome, which is the demiurgic system, the New World Order. Yeah, I think this film is great. And that's about it. That's my list. I might do a third one. We'll see how the reception is on this, and if I can come across some more films. I have a few honorable mentions that I can do. We'll see. But that's all I got. You can like and subscribe if you haven't already, and you can join my channel if you want to support me. And that's about all. Take care. Have a good day.